Hello and welcome to yesterday's airlines. NG model September announcement is the subject of this video. So we'll be ranking those releases from NG models in the next few minutes. Now, as you're probably aware if you watch my videos, I've been getting more critical of NG's release sets as the year has gone on, and this set, to be honest, follows very much in the vein of the previous ones. However, you're looking through initially when I looked at the announcement, and there was a wave of disappointment, as there quite often is nowadays with NG. But when I look through in detail and at the individual models that are being released, I can still see quite a lot of quality models in the set. However, they're not really models for me necessarily, and I guess that's not necessarily a problem, because there's a lot of collectors out there who potentially are interested in the models that are being released. So I try and keep an open mind when I'm doing these videos about the saleability and interest in the aircraft. But it goes without saying that the diversity that NG have been producing this year has been down quite dramatically, I think, on previous years. Now, if they release smaller release sets, perhaps they wouldn't be getting the same sort of criticism that they get here, because obviously there's quite a lot of models in this set. I think there's just over 30, but there's a lot of repetition just in the set itself, and it is unusual for a brand to release model versions of effectively the same aircraft in the same month, except it's become very usual for NG models, and I just don't really understand it. But hey, they do what they like. Also, pretty obvious is the dramatic decrease in the diversity of the molds that they're using and their inability to release regularly on the new molds. So, yet again this month, there are no 767s and there are no MD-80s, and we're just getting more and more of what we've been having the months before, you know, A350s, MAX 8s, 747-8s, admittedly, which are quite new. But there's this real focus on a smaller subset of molds, and all of this still makes me feel that NG are struggling. However, a good point, NG have cut their release backlog dramatically, and there's barely anything in that. So yeah, I don't really know how I feel about NG anymore. It's certainly not the excitement that I used to have, but they're still doing some stuff which is really cool. The CRP program is working well, though who knows how they can afford it, but it is working well. I got 5 free models from the last bunch. That was great. And they're still producing some really nice models, albeit there has been more issues creeping in here and there. Okay, anyway, let's get on and check out this release set. As I say, over 30 models, but there is a lot of repetition, so it kind of doesn't feel like that many. And before I do that, chuck a like on the video, please. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And check me out, obviously, at Airlines on Instagram and Facebook, and at yesterdaysairlines.com, where I'm doing a lot of work in relation to 400 scale. I'm just about to start going through my mold reviews, which look at which aircraft have been made, when they were made, who they were made by, how many different molds there are, because a lot of these need updating. I've just recently published new reviews for the IL-76, and there'll be more new reviews and updated reviews coming soon. So always keep an eye on my channels for new content. But let's get on and take a closer look at this set from NG. Okay, this is a very Boeing heavy set of models, so there's not a dramatic number of Airbuses, but we'll cover those off first. And the first model up is another Aegean Airlines. It's an A321neo. The registration is SX November Alpha Hotel, and this is far from the first Aegean Airlines release that NG have made. In fact, it will be the 6th, because they have made 2 A320neos, 2 A320ceos, and they've already made an A321neo as well. They made November Alpha Golf. So this one is a re-release. It's effectively the same, just the last letter of the reg has changed. And as nice as NAG was back in February 2023, this one, which actually does have a surprising delay in terms of being released by NG, yeah, not very interesting. So just in the workhorse, as you'd expect. Next up is a model which is fresh for NG. It is another Pandaroo Sichuan Airlines A350, and for all those non-Chinese collectors, you may be going, "Ugh, another one of these." But this one, B306 November, this was the second Sichuan A350 painted in Panda colours, and this one actually is surprisingly interesting because it has been made by Aviation 400, Phoenix, and JC Wings, but they all made it in 2019, and the only really good version of those was the AV400 one, which was really hard to get. I was surprised that I missed it, and I've not been able to find a good version of it since, because there isn't another good version. The JC and the Phoenix ones both have issues. So I'm really pleased to see this coming from NG Models on their updated A350-900 with the extended sharklet. So this one should be a really good model. Now this has been released in two versions, Ultimate Collection and Standard Release. But in this case, I'm going to put one of these up into High Flyer and I'll put the other one into Workhorse. They're effectively the same model, just different box. The next models are also an Ultimate Collection pair, one Ultimate, one not, and they represent the Delta Airlines Los Angeles 2028 Olympic scheme on N522 Delta Zulu. So this model, as you almost certainly are aware, has been made by Gemini Jets, exclusively for the Delta Team US shop. It's also been made by Phoenix, and it's also made by Aviation 400. I think this may be the one that Phoenix mucked up the underside of the aircraft on, I can't remember. But clearly this one from NG is going to be really good. I should also say that the AV400 version, though it was announced way back in May, has not seen the light of day yet, has had none of the removal gear A350s from AV400. So that was going to be out in a while. So really your choice at the moment is between the Gemini and the Phoenix. In that case, I think the Gemini wins. But if you compare NG, Gemini and Phoenix, then clearly the NG is going to be the better of the three. So it's not unique, it's not new as of such, but it is going to be another great model. And once again, I'll put one of these into High Flyer and the other one into Workhorse. The last Airbus of the month is the most surprising because it is an Emirates A350, A6EXA, their first A350. Now, Emirates has never been made, I think I'm right in saying, they've never been made by NG before, and we all know that Gemini has got a licensing agreement with Emirates, and almost nobody else makes Emirates models, or very rarely do they make Emirates models. The only brand that has in recent times really has been AV400. So this is quite unusual to see NG actually go there and make an Emirates model. There already has been a Gemini version of this made in November last year, but again, it's on the JC A350, which I don't love. That model turned out, the pictures I can see, it looked okay, but this one is clearly, again, going to be better. I'm going to put this one up in Supersonic, actually. I think this one is a really good choice and will be popular. And there are a lot of collectors I hear who complain about the Emirates releases from Gemini, not because there are so many of them, but because they don't like the molds that Gemini use. Okay, now that's the Airbus material for this month. And I guess it's not too bad looking at it. Moving on to the Boeings, and we start with another Chinese. And this month actually is good or bad, depending on your viewpoint here, because there's not a lot of B-Reg in this. For me, that makes it less interesting. For you, if you're based in the US, certainly, I imagine that makes it more interesting. But the first model up here is another China United 737-800. It's another special scheme. This one's City of Wenzhou. It's a very similar scheme to the scheme which is the City of Foshan scheme. It's got the blue tones, but it's got that same kind of pattern to the tail that several of these special schemes have had, where you've got these kind of diamond and rectangles in different colours, and then you've got some other scheme elements added to it. In this case, you've got a sun, you've got looks like a tower of some kind, a few temples and bits and bobs and some plants. They are really nice liveries, and this one again clearly is going to be a model which I'm super interested in getting. I really like these China United schemes, and I'm going to put this one up into Supersonic. The next two models are Chinese again, but they are nowhere near as interesting. They both represent China Eastern 777-800s. They're wearing the Yan'an Peacock, the orange version of that. So it's China Eastern Yan'an Airlines, really. B1789 and B1790. They've both got the new tail logo, so it's the new version of the Yan'an Peacock. Now, NG has made two versions of these already. They made 1788 and 1791. The latter being the aircraft that crashed, and it was a little bit controversial when they made it. Both of those were released as exclusives through the ngmodels.com CRP kind of program, but I think most people would have got one or two of those if they wanted them, and these two don't add anything different. They are effectively exactly the same. So I'm going to put both those down into workhorse. Now, we've got quite a few 737s left, and the majority of these, in fact, I was going to say the majority of them are in North America, but they're actually all in North America except for one, which is a Canadian reg, but actually is, arguably is Australian. The first one up is actually a really good choice, but it is familiar territory for NG. It's another Southwest Airlines 777-800. This one is wearing the new scheme, the new Triple Crown 1 colours. It's got scimitar winglets, and the reg of the aircraft is N8681 Mike. So they've made a lot of Southwest 737s, well over 30 now, different marks and lots of different scheme variants. So it's not too surprising this one turns up. However, as far as I can tell, it is one that hasn't been made by anybody else, and certainly it wouldn't have been made as nicely because no one else has got an 800 mold as good. So this one I think is another great choice. I think it will sell well in the States, and even though I'm not interested, it's a supersonic. Next up is that C-Reg hybrid. In fact, it's a registered CFLKC, but it's got Bonza Airlines titles. So it's one of the aircraft that was leased to Bonza from Flair for at least a short period. Now, obviously, Bonza has recently gone out of business, so it's a little curious that they are releasing this aircraft in that regard. As hybrid schemes go, this one actually isn't dreadful. It's not super exciting, is it? But it's a little bit interesting. As hybrids go, it's probably one of the better types of hybrids. Now, I actually quite like this one. I'm going to put this one in high flyer. It'll be probably picked up by quite a few Aussie collectors out there, even though Bonza is gone, and they didn't last very long, as the third competitor in Australia rarely seems to. It's not a bad choice. Okay, now we've got a run of American 777-800s. First one up is American Airlines. N338 Romeo Sierra is the registration. Much like quite a lot of the models in this set, they've been made before by Gemini, which is something I criticise Gemini for, so I should really criticise NG for it too, and to a degree I am here. So this has been made before by Gemini twice. It's also been made by Aero Classics. It's nothing unique about it, but obviously this will be a good version because the mould is good. It wouldn't surprise me if it sells well and does quite well. But it's solid and unremarkable, I would say. I'll put it into high flyer. It's got sales potential, but it isn't thrilling me. And next up, we've got what NG is doing a lot in recent months, and multiple versions of effectively the same aircraft. So we've got 4 United Airlines MAX 8s, starting off with N37318 wearing the existing scheme. Then we've got N77259 with this connecting the world, ensuring a better future greenwashing BS scheme. Then we've got N27261 with the United Together scheme. And lastly up, we've got N27255, which has an Aviate sticker on the front of it. Now, once again, the standard scheme has been made. It's been made by Gemini a couple of times. It's also been made by Aero Classics, I believe, too. Of the special schemes, none of them have been made before, I think, except possibly, has one of these been made before? Yeah, N27261 has been made by Gemini as well. That's the Being United Together one. These special schemes actually aren't all awful, and at least they kind of look quite nice on the aircraft. And what is a very attractive scheme anyway? The only one that doesn't really excite me is the Aviate one. It's just a sticker on the front, but the other two, actually play on the scheme quite nicely and work quite well. I'm going to put the first three into High Flyer, and I'm going to put the other one in the Workhorse. Basically, is where I'm going with this. Mainly because I think the Aviate sticker one that's the sort of special scheme livery I just don't feel the need to be released in 400 scale. The others, special schemes, they actually look like they're adding something to your collection. They'd look good and they're worth having, in my opinion. So if you're a United collector, I imagine you're reasonably comfortable and happy that there are 4 Max 8s. But even then, I'd be surprised if most United collectors get all 4 of them. I'm interested to hear if anyone on the video is going to get all 4 of these. So chuck me a comment if you are going to get multiple of these United 737 Maxes. I'd be interested to hear how many people are interested in all 4 or 2 or 3 of them. Now we've got another trio of repetitious models. We've got a threesome of Lufthansa 747-8s wearing the current scheme. We've got ABYA, ABYC, and then another version of ABYA with what I think is the German Olympics logo on it. It's like Team D, so I think it's Team Deutschland. It's a really small logo. It's like Lufthansa not really trying very hard with that. Yeah, there's not a lot to say here, I feel. Obviously, there have been previous versions of new colours, 747-8s from Lufthansa by Gemini jets, and also almost certainly by Phoenix as well. And there's also been a version recently by YY Wings as well. So there's not a lot new going on here, but to be fair to NG, they've not released one of these before. Not really sure we need 3 of them. So yeah, I'll High Flyer one and I'll put the other 2 down into Workhorse. And next up, we've got a couple of NREG 747-8 freighters. And I swore that NG had already made some of these before, but actually I'm getting confused, and it's probably because they released all those Atlas Air ones last month that's confusing me. So what we've got this month is a couple of UPS 747-8 freighters, and they haven't made any of these before. Both of them technically, I guess, are wearing special schemes, but they're not really. They've just got stickers on the front. First one is N633UP, which is celebrating the Queen of the Skies. And the other one is N605UP, which is the spirit of Joe Sutter. So, yeah, those stickers really are so small in 400 scale that I'd be surprised if anyone, even a UPS clip, was going to get both. They're so small you can barely tell the difference. And I don't think you'd really notice them unless you were really looking in 400 scale. So, yeah, this is classic NG nowadays, the sort of thing which I do find frustrating. But I guess if you treat this as one release, it's perfectly fine. If you treat it as 2 releases, you're going, well, that's a bit pointless. But I'll put one into High Flyer and I'll slap the other one down into Workhorse. So broadly, what I'm seeing in this release set is a lot of models which are probably going to turn out nicely, but that have already been made by Gemini beforehand, or other competitors, or even NG themselves. So there's not a lot new here. And if I'm looking through all the models we've looked at so far in this list, and it's really only the China United, Southwest, and that Flare Bonza hybrid that haven't been made by anyone. And everything else has effectively been made already, unless you take into account tiny special scheme variants, which I'm not. So, after what has been a reasonably okay scoring video, but one that isn't exciting me dramatically, what do NG do? They throw in a completely pointless fantasy model just to needle all those people who are super annoyed that they haven't released a TriStar in like 2 years. So that's what the next model is all about. It's a fantasy model. It's Malaysia Airlines. It's a 777-300, not an ER, just a 300. They're registered 9M MSA, and it's almost like a classic fantasy because I believe the story here is that Malaysia had ordered some 777s, but they never obviously took delivery of any 300s. And they obviously made a 200 or a couple of 200s controversially last month. So I guess this is relatively easy just to do the artwork here for what is, in effect, a complete waste of a model. It's not even an attractive fantasy scheme. It's a pretty standard, boring 90s livery from Malaysia. And who's asking for this? There must be like a small core of Malaysian collectors who went, I really want this fantasy model, but, you know, how many people can there really be looking for this release? Malaysia isn't a big market for 400 scale, I would assume. Yeah, I'm just going to workhorse it, but for me, it's just a waste, and it is vaguely insulting if you kind of take these things personally, which you shouldn't. Yeah, just a pointless model. And after that little bit of excitement, in a bad way, we're back to models which are, you know, run of the mill. So the next model up is one again that's been released by pretty much everyone. They haven't all got the actual model out yet, and it's the Go Canada Go Air Canada 777-300 ERC FIT whiskey. This has been announced and released by Phoenix. It's been announced by JC. It's been announced by Aviation 400. Those ones haven't got their versions out yet. Yeah, it's going to be perfectly nice, you know, and it'll probably be better than all the other variants. But it's a real struggle to get excited over it as well. I'm just going to put it in the high flyer. I recognise the validity of the release, but much with a lot of the models in high flyer here, I'm not recognising the interest factor. And as if NG are trolling me, the next two models, 7878s, are both Qatar Airways, because you can never have enough Qatar Airways, can you? And one of these is A7B Charlie Echo, and it's actually wearing the FIFA World Cup colours, even though that was 2 bloody years ago now. And they already released Bravo Charlie Alpha, wearing exactly the same scheme in February last year. So, much like the Aegean, this is a re-release of a model which comes from early last year, as opposed to releasing at least 4 versions of the same model in the same month. But, yeah, it's a bad release. It's not an interesting scheme. It's not an interesting livery. It's not an interesting airline. It's not even particularly interesting aircraft. There's nothing interesting about it, and they made it before. This one I'm going to put down into gas guzzler because it's annoying me. The other one is a scheme they haven't at least made, even though it's a very small special scheme. It's just got the 25 years sticker by the cockpit, and this aircraft actually was recently released by Aviation 400, so there's a version of it floating around. So I'll put it into workhorse, but I could easily have gas guzzled that one too, to be honest. Anyway, that rounds off those Boeing releases. There are still some Boeings to come, but they're not standard airline releases, so we'll talk about those in a bit. The last 2 models this month are the pair of Comacs, which inevitably were going to get released because Air China and China Southern have just taken delivery of their first C919s. So I've already discussed these models on the other videos. So we've got B919X, which is the Air China version. We've got B919J, which is the China Southern version. They've been announced by Panda Models. They've been announced by Phoenix. I think they've also been announced by JC Wings. Obviously, there's a lot of pride in China around these models. It's perfectly fine for NG to be releasing them as well. These may well be the best versions, but I'm really tempted to get one of the others because I want to see the molds. I'll put these both in the high flyer and, you know, move on. Now, there are still models to discuss, but we can get through these pretty quick. So we've got 5 blank releases this month covering off a 767-400 because they've obviously had that 1764 release out. We've got A330-800 and A330-900, 7478 and a 7478 Freya, all in blanks. And although they're probably is a reasonably strong market for blanks, I can't help but feel this is another cost-cutting mechanism for NG to be able to just releasing the blanks because it's obviously cheaper. I'm just going to workhorse all of them. They're not enormously exciting airframes anyway. And I just don't feel like for custom models, the reason people make custom models and want blanks is because they're making something which hasn't been made before. There's almost nothing that hasn't been made on 767-400 or these A380 Neo molds or 747-8s already in 400 scale. So what are you going to make on these except for fantasy models that hasn't already been made? Just seems like a bit of a pointless blank set. Not like the MD-80s they released the other month where there's tons of options. Oh, anyway, I'm going to workhorse those. Now, there are also 3 models in what is the NG Lite space. And if you don't know what NG Lite is, check out my video on that topic. Basically, we're going for cheap versions of NG releases. They're substantially cheaper, like 10 to 15 pounds or dollars cheaper than a standard release. And the choices here, there are 3, but I've only got an image of one of them. We've got a Qatar 777-300ER here in the anniversary retro colours. We've got a pair of Southwest Maxis in Canyon Blue and Desert Gold. It's really hard to say what I think about these because I don't know quite what they represent. Even looking at the artwork for the Qatari one, it does look like it's got aerials, but my understanding is that these models won't have aerials, so I'm interested to see whether it actually does or doesn't, and whether the gear is rolling, and basically what the hell the difference is between this and the previous release. The idea was of this NG Lite that they wasn't going to have aerials, they weren't going to have some of the bells and whistles like rolling gear. So it's hard to say. Qatar Airways Retro is a really odd choice. I would have thought that a lot of people buying Qatar are the sort of people, they've got plenty of money and don't need to get a light version of it. And the Southwest Maxis may well be more popular, but even then I get the feeling most people would just rather have the full version. Yeah, I don't know about NG Lite. It just seems like another thing that NG are doing, and it could be great, but is also equally probably a waste of time. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to put that Qatar into workhorse, and let's just move on. I just don't know. I just don't know about NG Lite as a concept. The idea is it's good, but it's got to be done in the right way. And just releasing models you've already made good versions of seems a bit pointless. Yeah, it seems a bit pointless to me. Okay, so that is my view on this set of models. I have seen a lot of criticism of NG for this set as soon as the hints were announced, and I tend to agree with most of it, to be honest. The sets are incredibly generic nowadays. They have a lot of the same aircraft in this habit of releasing the same reg, just re-regging the previous models, and even releasing them in the same month is just bizarre. But at the same time, when you look at the models individually, they're still really high quality models, typically on the best molds available. It's just such a shame that NG has effectively wasted a lot of the potential that it had. And nowadays, it's using a very small subset of its molds, a relatively small subset of airlines. It's basically becoming Gemini jets from China. That's the way I feel about it at the moment. It feels very Gemini. This release set feels very Gemini. Lufthansa, United, Delta, Emirates, Southwest, Air Canada, Qatar. It just looks like a Gemini release set. And maybe that's just because they're really focusing on trying to make as much money as possible from really high volume models, but it's boring as. And when I look at this set, there isn't a lot in here which is attracting me. But hopefully that isn't the case for everyone, and you guys are seeing more in here which interests you. As I say, I can see they're going to be some good models, but they're not particularly diverse or interesting models. So yeah, that's my view anyway. I'm really not sure what's going on with NG or what their future looks like at the moment. It will be interesting or depressing to see where they go, but I'm hopeful still. I still have hope that they will kind of get back to where they were, producing really high quality models for a more interesting mix of airlines and aircraft. But hard to see that happening at this moment. And the lack of their new molds in this set and last month's set and the set before, strongly suggests that they're struggling to get the artwork and production rolling for the MDAs and 767s. And we haven't even seen the A340 molds, and they were effectively okay when I reviewed them a year ago. So yeah, that's the way it is. Okay guys, anyway, thank you very much for watching as always, and keep an eye on the channel for all the latest news and views on 400 scale. But that's it from me for now. Goodbye.